We've now got some fundamental knowledge around schemas. Now that we've got that all under our belt, we're going to go back to our test setup and figure out how to make sure that every test file is somehow isolated from our other tests. Now, I got to tell you right away that there's going to be a little bit of complex code and understanding that's going to be needed to really put this stuff together. So I want to first outline a really big issue that we're going to run into as we start to try to tell each of our different test files to use our different schema. Okay, so I'm inside my users test.js file right now. I'm going to scroll down to the test we have written inside of here. So remember, inside of this test file, we've got a userrepo.count and a userrepo.count. So we are trying to get the count out of our user table at some point in time. Let's go take a look at the user repo implementation really quick and just take a look at what that count method really does. So inside of our src repos folder, I'll find user repo. Here it is right here. I'll then go down to the very bottom. And there's our count method right there. Remember, our count function is going to run select count star from users. So when we run this query right here, we did not designate some schema to make use of. So by default, we're going to use either the schema that is named after the current user connected to the database. So in my case, it would be SG. For you, it might be Postgres or whatever your username is. And if that doesn't exist, then it's going to fall back to using the schema of public. So right now, for all of our different test files, when they run that query or this userrepo.count, here's what's going to go on behind the scenes. So we've got user test file right here. It's going to run that statement, send it off to the database. And because we did not designate some schema, we were not specific, even if we have some other schemas available for these test files to connect to, this query by default is going to be executed against our public schema. And that's true of all of our different test files. Because we were not specific, because we did not designate which schema to use, they're all going to fall back to using the public schema. And so that makes we didn't gain anything here by creating some additional schemas. We still have all of our different test files still trying to access the users table or the same users table, and so we're still going to run into these exact same conflicts. So by just creating these schemas, we're not really doing anything. We need to somehow make sure that all the different queries that are somehow being executed from this test file, and this test file are being executed against some different schemas so that we get that isolation we are looking for. Turns out that is actually rather hard to do. How do we somehow tell this test file to use this schema, this one to use this schema, and so on? If you tried to take a kind of a naive approach here, you might say, okay, Stephen, well, we can do this. Maybe we can say that whenever we call userrepo.count, we will pass in the name of the schema to use. So maybe I want to use schema A, or how about like test schema A or something like that. And then inside of our user repo, maybe we could somehow accept that as an argument to count, and then somehow just reference that inside of our query itself. We can do some string interpolation or something like that and put in schema dot, like so. Yeah, this could technically work. You could definitely do this. But this would get really tedious really quickly to always have to worry about which schema we are somehow running this query against. So there's got to be a better solution here. I'm going to undo all of those changes very quickly. That was just a quick example. So that is definitely a naive way we could approach this, but definitely not ideal. There's got to be a somehow better way of doing this. So naturally, there is. Let's take a pause right here and take a look at the strategy that we're going to use to make sure that each of our different test files are going to run all of its queries against different schemas without having to modify the queries themselves.